On a warm summer day in 1833, after years of heated debate and mounting public pressure, the British Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act, a groundbreaking law that would send shockwaves across continents and change the course of history. It declared that, as of August 1, 1834, hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children across the vast British Empire would be legally freed from bondage. This was a pivotal turning point in the long and brutal history of transatlantic slavery, a system that had not only enriched Britain for centuries, but also left deep scars on generations of enslaved people. The act challenged the very foundations of empires built on forced labor, shaking the economic and social order of the time. Britain's global reach gave this decision unparalleled weight, sending a clear and unmistakable message to other slaveholding nations that the world was changing. The moral argument against slavery, once dismissed as radical or fringe, was now enshrined in law by the world's most powerful nation. But the story of abolition is complex, a tangled mix of heroic activism, economic calculation, and political pragmatism, with motives as varied as the people involved. The journey to 1833 was messy and hard-fought, waged not only in Parliament but also in public squares, on the printed page, and in the cane fields of the Caribbean. The act was a testament to the power of ordinary people, activists, former slaves, and everyday citizens, yet it also revealed the deep prejudices, compromises, and interests that shaped the meaning of freedom. To truly understand this moment, we must look beyond the halls of London, to the plantations, the bustling docks, and the voices of both abolitionists and the enslaved, whose courage and resistance made abolition possible. Their struggle is the heart of this story, reminding us that freedom is rarely given, it is demanded, fought for, and ultimately taken by those who refuse to be denied. The road to abolition was paved by a diverse coalition of activists. Figures like Wilberforce, Clarkson, and Sharp led a moral crusade using pamphlets, petitions, and powerful imagery to mobilize public opinion. First-hand accounts from formerly enslaved people like Olaudah Equiano shocked the British public. Women organized sugar boycotts, making the fight against slavery personal and urgent. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution shifted economic priorities. Factories, not plantations, were now central. The pro-slavery lobby's influence waned as new industrialists argued free labor was more productive. Political reform, especially the 1832 Great Reform Act, gave more power to abolitionist strongholds. The new parliament was finally receptive. Abolition was not the result of a single factor, but a convergence of moral outrage, activism, economic change, and political reform. When the bill came, it had unstoppable momentum. The abolition of slavery was the product of relentless pressure and shifting tides. The most powerful argument against slavery came from the enslaved themselves. Their resistance, sabotage, cultural preservation, and open rebellion made slavery costly and unstable. Daily acts of defiance chipped away at the system's profitability. Major uprisings like Busa's Rebellion, the Demerara Rebellion, and the Baptist War shook the foundations of slavery. The Baptist War, led by Samuel Sharp, involved tens of thousands and was brutally crushed, but its impact was seismic. Sharp's words, "I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live in slavery," echoed back to London. These rebellions forced Britain to confront the reality: the enslaved would not accept their condition. The cost of maintaining slavery soared, and violent reprisals fueled abolitionist outrage at home. The resistance proved slavery was not just immoral, but unsustainable. Britain faced a choice: endless conflict or abolition. The enslaved forced the issue onto the world stage. When news of the act reached the colonies, reactions ranged from joy to disappointment. The announcement traveled quickly, carried by ships and word of mouth, stirring anticipation and anxiety in equal measure. For many, it was a moment they had long hoped for, while others braced for uncertainty. For the formerly enslaved, August 1, 1834, brought prayer, celebration, and hope. Communities gathered in churches and open fields, singing hymns and giving thanks, their hearts filled with cautious optimism for a new beginning. But the reality was complicated. Freedom was heavily qualified. Many soon realized that the promise of liberty came with restrictions and new forms of control, leaving them uncertain about what the future would truly hold. Planters, furious and fearful, resented the act and saw it as a betrayal. Their livelihoods and social order seemed threatened, and many lobbied for compensation and tighter controls over labor. In places like the Cape Colony, anger over abolition fueled the Great Trek, as Boers sought to maintain racial hierarchy elsewhere. The movement of these settlers would shape the region's future conflicts and societies. For individuals, the change was profound. Families could not be sold apart, and basic rights were restored. For the first time, parents could hope to raise their children together, and people could begin to imagine lives of their own choosing. Yet, true freedom was elusive. Movement and labor remained restricted. Many were forced into apprenticeships, working for former masters under harsh conditions, with little say over their own lives. The transition varied across the empire, with tension highest where the enslaved were the majority. In these places, the fear of rebellion and unrest led to heavy military presence and strict enforcement of new laws. In some places, the act brought upheaval. In others, it was implemented quietly. The response depended on local conditions, the balance of power, and the willingness of authorities to enforce or resist change. Everywhere, it marked a break with the past and set the stage for new struggles. The old order was ending, but the path to justice and equality would be long and uncertain. The law redrew society's lines, but the fight for real freedom was just beginning. Across the colonies, people faced the challenge of building new lives and demanding the rights they had been promised. One of the act's most controversial aspects was compensation, not for the enslaved, but for the slave owners. The British government paid out £20 million, 40% of its annual budget, to former slaveholders. This was the largest bailout in British history until 2008. The West India lobby's power ensured the payment, arguing their property could not be confiscated without compensation. The debt was so large, British taxpayers were still paying it off in 2015. Records show bishops, MPs, and ordinary Britons all received payouts, revealing the scale of slave ownership. The money-funded railways, estates, and fortunes that endure today. For the formerly enslaved, this was a bitter insult. No land, no money, no resources. Their freedom was bought and sold, but the payment went to their oppressors. This decision entrenched economic inequalities that persist in former colonies. The compensation scheme showed where power truly lay. Freedom in 1834 was not immediate or absolute. The act imposed an apprenticeship system. The formerly enslaved had to work unpaid for their old masters for years. In theory, it was training for freedom. In practice, it was slavery by another name. Planters exploited the system, denying rights and using brutal punishments. The apprentices resisted, using the courts, slowdowns, and collective action. Reports of abuse and resistance reached Britain, reigniting the abolitionist movement. Public outrage forced Parliament's hand. In 1838, 2 years early, the apprenticeship system was abolished. Only then did hundreds of thousands achieve full, unconditional freedom. The flawed experiment left a legacy of broken promises and bitter memories. The struggle for real emancipation was far from over. The end of apprenticeship was a victory won by the persistence of the formerly enslaved. Britain's abolition sent shockwaves worldwide, transforming the anti-slavery struggle. As a global superpower, Britain's decision gave abolitionist movements everywhere new momentum. The Royal Navy began intercepting slave ships, disrupting the trade and freeing captives. Britain pressured other nations to sign anti-slavery treaties, building an international consensus. In the US, abolitionists were inspired, while Southern slaveholders saw a warning. The British example hardened divisions, fueling tensions that led to the American Civil War. Across Latin America, British pressure and example accelerated emancipation. France followed suit, abolishing slavery in 1848. Britain's 1833 Act set a new global standard. Slavery became a moral problem demanding a global solution. The world would never be the same. Abolition marked a profound shift in how humanity saw itself. For centuries, slavery was justified by race, economics, and religion. The anti-slavery movement challenged these ideas, advancing the radical notion of universal rights. "Am I not a man and a brother?" became a rallying cry for shared humanity. Abolitionists argued that every person has inherent dignity and a right to liberty. Their tactics, petitions, boycotts, moral appeals, inspired future social movements. The fight to end slavery expanded the world's moral imagination. Abolition did not erase racism or inequality, but it set a crucial legal and moral benchmark. Owning another human being was now recognized as wrong. The struggle for equality was just beginning, but the foundation was laid. The journey toward universal rights had begun. Today, the story of British abolition shapes our world in ways we often overlook. Its legacy is woven into the fabric of our daily lives, influencing the society we live in and the values we hold. The wealth generated by slavery built modern Britain, funding grand estates and institutions, while the lack of compensation for the enslaved entrenched inequality in the colonies. These disparities persist, visible in the economic and social divides that still exist between Britain and its former colonies today. Calls for reparative justice are growing louder, demanding not just recognition of slavery's lasting harm, but also meaningful action to address its consequences. The £20 million paid to slave owners is central to this debate, a debt acknowledged but paid to the wrong people. The descendants of the enslaved received nothing, while the legacy of that injustice continues to shape lives. This history challenges Britain's self-image, reminding us of its dual role as both slaver and liberator. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about national identity and collective memory. The resistance of the enslaved was as crucial as the work of abolitionists. Their courage and defiance played a vital role in forcing change, shaping the course of history. Understanding this history helps us see the roots of modern racism and inequality. It reveals how the past continues to influence attitudes, policies, and opportunities today. It reminds us of the power of ordinary people to fight for justice, and the importance of solidarity in the face of injustice. The ideals of freedom and human rights remain unfinished business, calling each generation to continue the struggle for equality and dignity. The echoes of 1833 are still with us, shaping our present and future, urging us to learn, reflect, and act for a more just world.